This is about performance-enhancing drugs or juicing. I was reading a book of essays by a man named Chuck Klosterman. He writes mainly about music and sports, which surprises people, according to him, that anyone would be interested in those two very different endeavors. But the more he looked into them, he wrote, the less different they became. There's a man in my city who runs a weekly sports talk show on the radio. He plays a lot of music and spends a fair amount of on-air time talking about the music he plays. He knows a great deal about it, and most callers will tell him that they enjoy the music and his discussions about musicians, songs, and certain albums, even though what they really want to talk about is sports. I'll admit that I was getting weary of Klosterman's book. The celebrity interviews were doing me in. Some subjects didn't interest me, and worse, they didn't seem to mean all that much to him either. So I was sort of drifting along, making a job of it. Not a nice thing to do to a book, but of course I was thinking that it was the book that was doing it to me. The short of it is that we were not getting along when he hit me with a decent piece on the 100-yard dash, wondering if there is a limit to how fast it can be run, and speculating on that limit and when it might be reached, and also wondering about a modern sprinter who regularly runs under 10 seconds in the race. Is he a better runner than Jesse Owens, whose best time was 10.3 seconds? But that was only teeing me up for another piece on the use of drugs in sports, especially football. Athletes use drugs so they can be faster and stronger, and we spectators like that. We like it a lot. It's wonderful, even if it is cheating. If an athlete is faster and stronger, they will earn a lot of money and acclaim and will increase their chances of winning. And in sports today, winning is everything. There is no other consideration. So it's all good when you win, and you do everything you can to win. The end, winning, justifies the means, even if the means is performance-enhancing drugs. But then major sports leagues and the Olympics decided that drugs provided an unfair advantage, as they surely did, and they banned their use, banned the athletes who used them, and especially East Germans and them Russians. And baseball, which had so loved and so dearly needed the summer of Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, had to denounce all the juicers. I can recall when reporters began to mention the huge container of anabolic steroids in McGuire's locker, sitting there in plain sight, with him nonchalantly gobbling them down. So what do? Keep the drug users out of the Hall of Fame? Or let them in and understand that they were from that era? What would Babe Ruth have done on steroids? Thanks to Barry Bonds, we know. The author makes all of this more riveting and problematic by veering off into music, to the time when Bob Dylan got the Beatles stoned in 1964. The albums they made after that, Rubber Soul and Revolver, were definitely the product of heavy drug use, but no one came up and said, hey, no fair. These guys had an unfair advantage. They're using drugs. The musicians were using performance-enhancing drugs, no question about it, as were most of their listeners. And how much music before that and since then have been directly connected to drugs and drug use? Well, whatever happened to better living through chemistry, and progress is our most important product. If drugs create a better product, in our ears and on the field, do we allow its use, or do we exclude it and settle for an inferior experience? At the least, it's an interesting question, a dilemma.